One, two, three. Hello, everybody. It's a great honor for me to be here today. Today, we're going to be talking about how to achieve speed with global mindfulness. Before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about who I am. My name is Leonardo Murillo. Everybody calls me Leo. I'm principal partner solutions architect at Weaveworks, and I'm also founder of a company called Cloud Native Architects. I'm very much involved in the community. I am a CNCF speaker and community organizer, as well as DevOps Institute ambassador, and I'm a chair for the Open GitOps project and the GitOps working group. I love to connect with others and kind of talk about this really cool things that we do today in technology. So please do look me up. You can see how to reach me on LinkedIn and Twitter, or look me up in my blog at my personal website, okay? Let's get started. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. This is usually referred to as a Native American proverb. And to me, it summarizes the principles of sustainability, right? That we should be meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And this is the basis of what I want us to talk about today. But this is not a bash against technology. I love technology. I've been doing technology since I was 13 years old. And this is not a counter argument to speed. I think we should be going as fast as we can. And I'm a DevOps Institute ambassador. We're all about agility, fast feedback, quick iterations. And this is a DevOps conference. So we're all into that. And this is not a sermon, okay? I'm not here to tell anybody what we're doing wrong. What my real objective is to expand the way that we think, to expand our minds, and become conscious of how we are all interconnected and how we can use technology if we don't make mistakes that we've made in the past, to realize an incredible, healthy, and fulfilling future for all the upcoming generations, as well as for our own generation right now. So that is really my objective, okay? So that we can think outside of the box and think globally, okay? Now, how did it all start? Like, why did I want to do this talk? It's a funny story because it all started with an ORM. For those in the audience that don't know what an ORM is, it's an object relationship mapping framework, okay? What it does is it allows you to not have to write structured query language, SQL, to be able to engage, say, a database, right? It allows you to just work with objects in your native language, whichever language you're using to develop your application. It's a lot faster to use an ORM as opposed to writing structured query language. But it does that because it generalizes a lot of things, right? It's an abstraction. And this generalized abstraction is prioritizing convenience and speed over computational efficiency. So we started with an ORM where we wanted to go fast. And then the cloud was a catalyzer to this vision of mine, because the cloud gave us infinite compute instantly available. So what's the story? What happened? The development team started to use this ORM, and they were going really, really fast, but the data structures that we were working with were very complex. So the queries that the ORM was producing for our developers were not efficient. But the developers didn't really care about that because we were on the cloud. So we could just throw massive amounts of compute at the problem. And although the queries were not efficient and the code was not efficient, we could go really fast just because we were using this massive amount of capacity to overcome what really were efficiency engineering problems, okay? So I started thinking, what are the repercussions? What is the impact of these decisions that we're making as an industry, as developers, as engineers, to move fast. And the thing is that the whole industry is moving in that very same direction. You've heard Mark Zuckerberg say, like move fast and break things. But I started to wonder, what if what we're breaking goes beyond my generation? What if what we're breaking goes beyond our organization? And this is happening across the industry. Companies, and this is something that Gene Kim has spoken about at length, companies are shifting from optimizing for cost to optimizing for speed, which again, I'm all up for, is great. The whole idea here is that if you go faster, your costs will basically naturally reduce because you're spending less time and dedicating less effort into accomplishing your objectives. But I started thinking, cost is really not just about money. There is always a cost to the environment, there's a cost to society, and there's a cost to the economy at large. That should also be a component in our thought process that we should be mindful of when we make these decisions. And we have wanted to go really fast in the past. And we've made less than ideal choices that back then we really didn't know what we were getting into. We really didn't take our time to be mindful about really understanding the scope of what we could break into the future. And we're dealing with that today. So that's exactly what I want us to avoid. Because it's already in certain places and to some degree happening. It's all over the news how cryptocurrencies have a massive footprint. It's not just electricity, it's not just power consumption, right? It's very interesting, but the life cycle of the average device, of the average processing unit that is used to effectively mine cryptocurrency has a relatively short lifespan. So miners are always needing to upgrade their devices to be able to adjust their capacity to the increasing complexity of the computations that need to occur. So that produces a huge amount of electronic waste, namely hardware that becomes deprecated and that needs to be thrown away. There's also a direct relation with energy. The higher the price goes, the more consumption in terms of energy that will need to be consumed. And an interesting factor of that is that I believe the statistic was that around 65% of all cryptocurrency mining is happening in China, for example, where the majority of energy production is using coal and fossil fuels. So already we're making choices that may have consequences into the future that we have to be mindful of. Democracy was affected by choices that we in the industry, that we as producers of engineering and software products have to a certain degree enabled, right? It's all over the place, all over the news, how Facebook skewed otherwise democratic and social processes, right? So we're already at this juncture where the huge power that we have as builders of technology, the huge capacity that we have as engineers and leaders, is now at a point where it can direct the world in a good or negative way. So how do we make sure that it's in a good way, right? That's what I want us to talk about today. I want to share some ideas with you all that I think are relevant to keep in mind when we make choices as leaders, when we make choices as engineers, to keep us in a sustainable path, so that we can build systems that are not just going to provide value to us today, but that are not going to break anything for generations to come. To me, one of the first things where we have to start is expanding our concept of cost. When most organizations and most executives and leaders think about cost, they're usually talking about the dollars at the bottom of their cash flow. Okay, they're just looking at the bottom line. Is this profitable or not? How does this look to our balance sheet? But as leaders, we have to expand that thinking to understand that the decisions that we're making as we build software, as we build products, have a cost that is not just financial. There is always going to be a cost to the environment. There's always going to be a cost to the economy as a whole, and there's always going to be a cost to society. Now, those are attributes that are difficult to quantify when we're making our decisions. But what is important is that we keep those in mind. We should look for positive investment, for positive return. But we have to keep in our minds that the decisions that we're making are larger than just that. And try to dig in and dedicate cycles of our mental energy to understand how are we affecting the environment, the economy, and society. As leaders and as engineers and engineering leaders in organizations, we want to encourage sustainable thinking. Now, again, these are not direct mechanisms to modify how decisions are made. They're indirect. They embed in people's minds a broader view of the world, a sense of responsibility to the future. So what are some of those small things that you can do to encourage sustainable thinking? Everything from allowing or promoting a program of reduce, reuse, and recycle, right? Promoting green means of transportation. Exposing your teams, exposing your people to the world. Sometimes you're basically boxed into our own little reality, but the more of the world that you can see, the more that you'll realize why we have to make sure that it's kept healthy. So encourage travel, encourage a healthy, balanced lifestyle. These are all the things that you can do. And once your teams and your people have this seed implanted where they are actually always considering sustainability in their decisions, that will directly translate to the decisions that they make when they're writing code, when they're designing software, when they're building architecture. And when they are writing software and building architecture, and this is particularly important for engineering leaders, you want to defend efficient engineering. You are going to get influences and pressure from all over the place to cut corners, to leave some technical debt behind. And this is not just about computational efficiency, right? This is about security. Security is also another component that may break the future for our next generations, right? I think as technical leaders, we have to defend engineering efficiency. We have to promote in our engineers that building software is not just about finding the simplest, fastest, off-the-shelf package that can do whatever they're looking to do. We want them to study them, to understand whether they're efficient. We want them to be more than just integrators. We want them to be actual creative minds solving problems efficiently. And I think to promote this idea of engineering efficiency that must be defended, you need to start treating, or we have to go back to treating compute capacity as a scarce resource. It was that way. And I mean, if you think about going, I don't know, 20, 30 plus years back in time, the capacity in terms of memory, of storage, was dramatically less than what we have today. And engineers have to dedicate a lot of time to finding ways and being creative about how they're going to fit whatever type of functionality they have to build into this very limited capacity. We don't live in that world anymore, and it's fantastic because we can reach gigantic scale. But I think going into any project, we should treat compute capacity as a scarce resource because we want to be able to quantify the compute cost of the software that we're writing. I like to think about it as going in, understanding what is the maximum amount of dollars that I want to spend per transaction, per event, per gigabyte, terabyte, or petabyte of data process. Not just in terms of cloud resources, for example, but also the cost that your code is producing as it computes this type of activity, right? Go out with a budget of computation resources that you want to work with. As much as you have infinite capacity in the cloud, you should not use that as a weakness that actually promotes poor engineering and that promotes inefficient code or even insecure code. Okay? You want to make sure that you promote this idea that capacity has to be dictated ahead of time, that it's designed, not accidental, how much capacity you use. Another that is the important aspect that I think everybody has to keep in mind whenever making choices, whether which cloud provider to use, what type of technology to use, etc., is really understanding the full supply chain. Everything is coming from somewhere else. Everything was made, built by somebody. Where are things sourced? What type of energy and other resources were consumed for the production of what we are consuming? You should pick the right cloud, you should pick the right partners. And those are the ones that have recognized that they have a footprint and are doing something about it. And the best way to understand that is by having clear view as to what the full supply chain of everything that you're using and everything that you're doing looks like. Okay, and this is something that we as leaders also need to promote with our teams. We should demand transparency from all the companies, partners, and providers that we work with. We want to know that they're transparent, and their transparency is going to translate into what our teams understand, because it will be clear to them what type of footprint is being left behind by our partners. And of course, we need to consider social impact. The internet is a phenomenal means to connecting people, to enabling all sorts of capabilities. So much so that it actually can transform the way that we interact and the way that we behave and how we communicate. And a lot of the systems and things that we're building today are actually going to define that to some degree. They're going to have some impact as to how we engage with one another. Is where we're building something that isolates us or that binds us together? Is what we're building is something that allows us to have more negative arguments, that allows us to have more empathy? The bottom line of our choices is not just financial, so it's social as well. And we want to make sure that we discuss this. When you're designing a product, when you are building a feature, think about social impact, not just how are you going to get viral and how are you going to get more clicks. Think about the value beyond just functionality. Think about the bigger scope. How is what you're building going to make our society a better place? And the reason I think about all this is because this is my future generation, okay? I have 3 kids, and my life changed after they were born, after my first one was born, and it keeps changing every day. And I want them to have the best world that I can leave behind. And I know that us as engineers, as technology leaders in organizations, are in a unique position to make that a reality, to make that happen. So I really hope that I've triggered some curiosity. I really hope that what I've shared with you today will allow you to think about a few more things when you're making choices, and will help us all as an industry and as leaders to move the needle towards a future where we can actually use technology to create the phenomenal world that we all want to build. So thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to participate in this phenomenal event, and reach out to me if you want to talk some more. Thank you.